Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. Today I want to take a quick look at the 6th episode of Better Call Saul Season 4. A friendly warning to all. If you aren't caught up on all of Better Call Saul and all of Breaking Bad, there will be spoilers in this video. So viewers, please be warned.
Chuck won a case that Howard thought was unwinnable using only the power of obscure case law.
Things begin with a flashback to Jimmy's days in the mailroom of HHM. He's running an Oscar pool apparently from 1993, Kim is chatting with Jimmy, and Chuck is strutting around like he's the Godfather, having just won big in the Isaacson case. Jimmy finds his way into the library. Kim's working on Mesa Verde, but she's distracted by her criminal law hobby. She heads to bed, and she sees that Jimmy has once again been planning a future for a Wexler McGill firm. Jimmy's making the morning OJ, they have their morning chit-chat, and the highlight of their conversation involved the shrink.
Does that mean you were able to schedule an appointment with a therapist?
I decided not to go.
Oh.
I realized it's just not for me.
Why not?
It's just not. Yeah, listen, I know you wanted me to go.
You have to do what's best for you.
Kim meets with Rich at Schweikert and Coakley. Rich is happy Kim referred Billy Gatwood to them, and Kim has a proposal for Rich regarding their non-existent banking division.
How's your banking division?
Well, we have some banking work, but I wouldn't say we have a division.
Would you like one?
Mike and Gus are checking out a huge warehouse that includes 2 dwellings for the team of Germans about to begin the excavation process. But Mike suggests they need a bar and some other various forms of entertainment to help keep the workers' spirits high and to keep them loyal.
These guys are going to be doing 10 hours heavy labor every day. We can't just keep them alive. We got to keep them from climbing the walls.
Tyrus gives Gus an update about an infection, and Mike tells Tyrus what he needs to keep the Germans happy. Jimmy is doodling logos for Wexler McGill while seeking out a big truck. He gets a call regarding a will he did for Geraldine Strauss. It's Mrs. Strauss's nephew, Brett. He doesn't understand the finer details of the will, but Jimmy is no longer practicing, so he gives her nephew a referral to HHM. Jimmy digs out an old VHS tape starring the aforementioned Mrs. Strauss. And Jimmy appears to mourn her passing, as he was disappointed he had missed her service the previous week. Note that this is something Jimmy still hasn't done for his own brother Chuck. Kim calls Jimmy, and he meets her for a meal. Kim informs Jimmy that she met with Rich, and that she was offered a partnership with Schweikert and Coakley to build and run their new banking department. Kim also shares for the first time that her true passion is in criminal law.
I'm helping people, Jimmy, and I know that sounds cheesy. It's whatever, but it's the truth.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
Jimmy lies to Kim, saying he was thinking of becoming a criminal lawyer too, unaware of the fact that Kim had already peeked at his doodlings. Jimmy sneaks away to regroup, having once again lied to Kim, saying he needed to hit the head. Jimmy gets his shit together, and when he returns to Kim...
I say do it. Kim, you gotta do what's best for you.
Mike visits Stacey and gives her a quasi-apology for his recent outburst at the support group.
I stand by what I said. The guy's a charlatan. But there's a time and there's a place, and that wasn't it.
Jimmy visits Howard, gets his $5,000 check, and he sees that Howard is still a mess. Howard is still clearly broken, and now Jimmy appears to be feeling guilty about that, so he tries to fire Howard up.
You're a shitty lawyer, Howard, but you're a great salesman. So get out there and sell.
Fuck you, Jimmy.
There you go. Use that.
Jimmy gets a big truck, and he's moving a shitload of prepaid phones into his office at the Day Spa Now. Mrs. Newen isn't happy about this, so Jimmy gives her a free phone on the house. Hector is in a coma, but Gus is watching over him like a creep. Gus speaks to Hector in a very friendly tone and tells him a long story about an old fruit tree and a gawati. The point of this story, apparently, was that Gus is a sadistic man, and he takes pleasure in seeing his perceived enemies suffer. Like John Kreese from Cobra Kai, Gus embraces the ideal that an enemy deserves no mercy.
The merciful thing would have been to kill it. It lived for quite some time.
A man confronts you, he is the enemy. An enemy deserves no mercy. What is the problem, Mr. Lawrence?
I believe you will wake, Hector.
The German excavation team shows up at the warehouse, and the Germans are all fired up about their new funhouse. A few immediately head to the bar, one samples a lazy boy, others begin shooting hoops and doing other things, but Mike has something important he needs to tell them. Despite pleas from his boss, Kai rudely insists he pour himself a cold one before the speech. Mike lets them know that they're going to get whatever they need, but he's none too happy about that wise-ass Kai. So Mike tells the security team to keep an eye on Kai. Jimmy approaches the three punks who robbed him with a proposition, but they didn't care for the offer and they threaten to rob him again. They pull a knife on him, and Jimmy runs. Amazingly, Jimmy is able to outrun these three punks, and he actually seems to be gaining on them. Is that Jimmy McGill or Apollo Creed? Jimmy gets cornered, but he led them into a trap because Jimmy brought some muscle with him. Huel and some other dude who looks familiar have the three punks tied up and hanging from a ceiling. They begin bashing piñatas, and this scares the shit out of the punks.
You get one warning, and that was it.
All in all, I found this to be a very enjoyable episode. Last week began with a flash forward to the Breaking Bad timeline, and this week began with a flashback from before the Better Call Saul timeline. Last week we saw the final demise of Saul's career as a lawyer, and this week we see what must have been the very moment when he first decided he wanted to become a lawyer. Jimmy still hasn't faced his own guilt regarding Chuck's suicide, but ironically, he is now facing his guilt over making Howard feel guilty. The sight of Howard all broken and distraught disturbs Jimmy dearly, and in a sense, I think this completely releases any ill will Jimmy may have felt towards Howard. I think this kind of acts as a clean slate between the two. It's also worth noting that Jimmy did more to mourn over the death of Mrs. Strauss than he did over Chuck as well. Gus's sadistic side reared its head in this episode when he not only tormented Hector, but he made a point to say he can't wait for Hector to wake up for some real tormenting in the future. At the end of the day, this is Gus's one weakness that leads to his own demise. Had Gus shown mercy and just had Hector killed, something he could have done by now many times over, then there is a strong likelihood that Walter White never has a co-conspirator to take Gus down. If Gus wasn't so sadistic, the theme that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that dynamic likely never comes into play. With Jimmy and Kim, all of the lies between them, usually lies of omission, these lies are affecting the relationship. By keeping stuff from one another, they are both planning futures that the other isn't on board with. Kim got the inside scoop on this when she peeked at Jimmy's doodlings, so she now knows her plans don't align with Jimmy's. But Jimmy only wanted his plans to be aligned with Kim. So had Kim not been keeping stuff from Jimmy, his future plans no doubt would have shaped differently. As it stands now, Kim seems to resent the idea that Jimmy doesn't want to see the shrink, and Jimmy seems to resent Kim for not telling him about her ambitions, to leave banking law in favor of criminal law.
You have to do what's best for you.
Kim, you gotta do what's best for you.
Jimmy and Kim still seem to genuinely care for one another, but they are most certainly not showing one another the same degree of mutual respect that was once there. Some really great storytelling in this episode, and I really can't wait for the next one. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed, and have a wonderful night.
Ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. That is a successful business. Because back then, I guess I was one of them.
Well, those days are over.
You get one warning, and that was it.
There's holmium and helium and hafnium and erbium and phosphorus and francium and fluorine and terbium and manganese and mercury, molybdenum, magnesium, dysprosium and scandium and cerium and cesium.